Everybody, welcome, remnants. We are glad to have you. I don't know if you, with such a large church that we have, if you ever sit in church and think of all those people and wonder, they all have a story. What is their story? Just a church as large as ours, just think of all the stories. Well, today we have a really unique visitor story that we'll get to hear all the way through. Danny MacDonald has been in our church for 30 years.
Yeah, 97, almost 30 years.
Yeah, almost 30 years. And we don't probably know him. Maybe a few of you do. And then all of his class that have come to support him also. Just think, I mean, we've started with our class putting up a little brief about our bio, is what I ask for. And we've learned things about our class that we just didn't know. So it's really neat, but we're really happy to have Danny come. This is Danny MacDonald and hear his story. Thank you.
If you put this on, please, sure. It's on. Two things real quick before I start. You guys booed Mike, who's one of your own, so I'm a little concerned about myself. And second, I love that y'all are doing the retreat, but with people like Gail and Charlotte in your class, I feel, do you need chaperones? Possibly? Never tell. Well, I appreciate you letting me come this morning. It has been an interesting last 2.5 years that I've had, and didn't plan for it, didn't expect it, but it's happened. So we've taken it head on. My wife Emily is back here. We got married here, and Dave Benson married us in 1998. Malone was booked up too far out in advance, as you remember. We didn't plan far enough ahead, and but enjoyed Dave Benson marrying us in the chapel in 1998. We've got 3 children, 26, 24, and 20. And we've lived in Brookfield for 25 years in the same house. I coach baseball as well. I've been an assistant coach at Roswell High School, assisting their varsity for the last 12 years, baseball, and I was at the Walker School for a few years before that. So that's a little bit of my extracurriculars. But what I want to share this morning is just, how Jesus Christ and I ended up face to face in, a time where I was diagnosed with a serious illness, which I'll get into. And it's just about what we've learned and what I learned as far as, things like courage and facing mortality and just the physical and spiritual and mental changes that have occurred along this journey. And the story is less about what happened to me. It's less about the before and the after, and it's more about the journey during, which is where a lot of the change has occurred. So any at the end, take any questions, save them to the end if you have anything or just want to know anything else that I may or may not cover. And again, I appreciate you guys letting me be here. So when people hear a testimony of healing or hear somebody sharing their story, especially in something like this, you want to know, well, what was the diagnosis? What was going on when that happened, and what's going on now? But again, I want to fill you in from a more of a timeline perspective to what happened during, because from the beginning to the end, I guess early on I was asked, was I scared? Was I, this, that, the other? And I feel, I was actually talking to another pastor, Pastor Jordan, who's the pastor of River Cliff Lutheran Church down in Sandy Springs. And he asked me one day, how I was doing. And I said, I was great. And he asked me what my mental state was. And I said, Pastor, this is probably about a month into it. I said, I feel like I've been awakened. So just keep that in mind, and I'll touch more on that in a little bit. So if I had to summarize, my story in 2 sentences, I was diagnosed with esophageal cancer in October of 2023 that later metastasized to my liver. Once that metastasized, it gave me about an 8% 5-year survival rate. And through faith and prayer, Jesus Christ has healed me. And I've had, as of last week on Tuesday, 18 months of clear scans. Thank you. So that's kind of the summary. Now let's back up a little bit and peel back the onion. So, the headline is an indication, but always is never the real story and the full story. And that's what I want to try to do, is just kind of give you a little bit more of a full picture. And I better put my phone up here so that I see the time, because I can run my mouth with the best of them. I could be up here an hour if y'all didn't stop me. So I think one of the biggest takeaways I've had from this is, well, again, let me go back a little bit. Before the diagnosis, life was busy and it was full. And, at the time, I was 51 years old. I'm 54 now. And, we had, my son was, I got diagnosed in October of 2023. He was just starting his senior year of high school. And we already had 2 out of college. At the time, it would have been, 22 and 23, or 20 and 23. And, we were in the throes of everything. We continued to, or we'd been members here since 1997. But to be honest with you, especially since COVID, we were not members. We were, but we weren't. And I had thought I, pretty much had a good handle on things and had everything figured out. And newsflash, I didn't. Before the diagnosis, I wasn't healthy. I was 241 pounds the day I was diagnosed. I was 241 pounds, 5'9". I always said I wasn't overweight. I was under tall. Okay. If I'd have been 6'5", I'd have been perfect. So, I was 241 pounds. About 6 months prior to, I had been diagnosed with fatty liver, enlarged liver. I was on high blood pressure medicine and I was on cholesterol medicine. And, I had started to have some symptoms, eating every now and then, food would feel like it got stuck. And so I knew something was going on and that I needed to look into it. But, I procrastinated and hadn't done that. And that wake up call when, or again, I was pretty much spiritually with everything, later on in reflection, I was going through the motions. And I think we all in our lives get in those periods where we do that. But I really thought back about it. And listen, Kelly Myrick and I and some other people went to Mongolia in 2004 on a mission trip. I've been to Nairobi twice to go see GOA, and went, on 2 different trips. Emily went to Kenya, and so I was checking the boxes. Went and did some mission things, and try to be a good person and whatever. But in reflection, I realized I was really just going through the motions. I was average at best, spiritually just with a lot of things, I was just, came to the realization that I was just average. So, the wake up call came. I'm sitting working in my office upstairs. She was we both work from home. She was downstairs. And when I would get that feeling that something was stuck, I would drink some water and it would, push it down, whatever. But I got that, it was always after I ate, and I got that feeling and I hadn't eaten anything. So I went to the kitchen and drank some water, and it felt like it was going to choke me. So I leaned over in the sink and threw up, and it was blood. So threw up blood, said, that's not good. Called downstairs to Emily and said, you may want to come up here real quick for a second. So she came upstairs and we went to the emergency room to North Fulton. They did an endoscopy the next morning and diagnosed him with a bleeding ulcer. Gave me some medication, sent me home. But on a side note, he said, I took some tissue, just to, something, looked, not quite normal, and just want to rule some things out. So I snipped some tissue and we're going to send it off. So that was September 12th, or September 13th of 2023. And 3 weeks later, I'd almost kind of forgotten about it. We're sitting on the couch one night watching TV 3 weeks later, and a text pops up. It says, you have a test result in my chart. So I open it up and I read it, and I looked over at her and I said, I think I have cancer. So it was adenocarcinoma, esophageal cancer. And I had a 3 centimeter tumor right before the gastric junction, down into my stomach. So at that point, I think, the initial reaction was more just a little bit of shock. I get asked, what was I really was just kind of numb initially. I didn't know what to think. She was being positive, and I think she said, well, let's just wait until in the morning, and then we'll call the doctor, and, so on and so forth. And the next morning my phone rang at 7:30, and it was the doctor's office calling me. With technology these days, I found out on my own without, the physician, but they called the next morning and the ball started rolling. And the go forward was at that point, out of my hands, to a certain extent, and I'll expand on that in a minute. But the initial feelings in the days to come were, that of some fear, fear of the unknown. But really, I have a wife that is in research for a living. So she got on it. And when I say she got on it, I wouldn't be here without her, for sure. And I'll put it this way, at our first meeting with the oncologist, we walked out the door and she grabbed Emily by the arm and said, what part of the medical field are you in? And Emily said, I'm not. I'm in market research, but I'm in market research in the food and beverage industry. I work with Coca-Cola and Chick-fil-A. And she's like, wow, you really did your homework. And she said, you're about the most knowledgeable patient I've ever had at our first meeting like this. So I had I had that asset on my side from the get-go, which has been very instrumental in why I'm still here. So, I in my own internal, conversations with myself, which are great because I'm always right. But in my own internal conversations with myself, I'm thankful that I never went. It's just my personality. I had a father that was positive to a fault, and I think I got a lot of that from him. So I kind of went into in thinking about it, instead of, why me, why is this happening to me? Woe is me. I'm thankful that he took me down a mental path of attacking it, taking it head on. And, instead of fear and anger and confusion and things like that, that happened to us, he gave me courage. And that's become a big word in my life, because I think, a lot of stuff that happened to us, it takes courage. It takes courage to stay married. It takes courage to raise kids. It takes courage to just get through life, because life is really, really hard. And it's one thing that I think I always knew deep down, but just really hit me in the mouth when this happened was, how hard life really is. And it's hard in many different ways, and it's hard in beautiful ways. And uh, from where I'm going to talk now, I want you to take one thing away from this, and I credit Emily with this. It's as hard as it was, and everything that I went through, physically, pain, mentally, and everything else. Um, it was really beautiful in a lot of different ways, and I'll share that in a little bit, because there's just so many things that have. I have an elevator speech, or talk, and I'll tell you again in a minute the source of it, but don't catch my eye in the grocery store line, because if you do and say hi to me, I'm going to say, hi, do you want to hear a story? And I was never like that before. Okay. So, the that story that I give them in 60 seconds includes, one thing, but I tell them there was 10 other things that happened along the way that was divine intervention. Well, this is those 10 things, and this is those 10 things were that beautiful journey along the way that I'll get into here in a second. And again, I don't want to come across that I didn't have any fear or wasn't scared, because there were a lot of moments where that tried to creep in. And that's the devil's work. But God, Jesus Christ, kept me on a mental path that allowed me to just kind of shuck that fear and trepidation and being scared off. There was a lot to figure out, and we started treatment in November. So November 2023, went through 6-week period, November to just about the week before Christmas. Six chemo infusions, one a week for 6 weeks. And in that same time, 28 radiations. So every weekday for 6 weeks, we drove. I had everything done with Wellstar Cancer Center at Kennestone, is where we did everything. So for 28 days, every weekday for 6 weeks, I drove over there at 6:30 every morning. I took the first appointment so I could get it done, and get back and get back to work. And then once a week I had the chemo. So 241 when I started. When those treatments were over in December, I lost about 50 pounds. I was down to about 190. And at that point we felt, good, and I had my issues with nausea and a lot of other stuff, but we then looked forward to about 6 weeks. They gave all that time, and surgery was scheduled for February 5th. So I had surgery February 5th. I won't get too awful detailed, but I had what's called an esophagectomy. They cut my esophagus off in the neck and took my esophagus, a third of my stomach, 18 lymph nodes, and all that tissue out, and pulled my stomach back up and reattached it in my neck, and that's my plumbing now. So at that point, they told me you'd probably lose about 10% of your body weight, which down the road, sure enough, I ended up about 170 after the surgery. They pathologied all that tissue, and they found cells in one of the 18 lymph nodes they took out. So at that point, we'd hoped it hadn't gotten past the lymph nodes. So started an immunotherapy infusion every 2 weeks at the end of February of 2024, and then we just tried to get back to life as usual. And I'm going to backtrack about the surgery and some things that happened in a minute, but after we get 3 months down the road, I had my quarterly scan 3 months post-op, and it had not been contained, and 2 small lesions showed up on my liver, so it had metastasized to my liver. So at that point, next protocol, 6 weeks of radiation in 3 days with a machine that the radiologist knew were called a cyber knife. So they basically just fried those two spots in 3 days. And then July 10th of 2024, I started chemo again. Fast forward to the end of September, it was, and these treatments were to be one every 2 weeks instead of every week, 12 instead of 6, and it was a lot stronger drug the second time around. So, and I was still getting the immunotherapy at the time. So into September, I had a scan on a Tuesday, treatment on Wednesday. I walk in for treatment, and about an hour before my infusion, it was to be my 6th treatment, so halfway, and about an hour before my infusion, the scan came back, and it was NED, no evidence of disease. So the oncologist said, "Hey, that's awesome. We'll still do the treatment today, but we can't justify continuing with it based on the fact that that day when I weighed in, I was 129 pounds when I weighed in that day. And I was hard to look at. And we went ahead and did the infusion. And, but, again, I was like, praise the Lord, we're going to stop chemo. And this is when, for me, it's the most poignant thing that happened of all of the divine intervention that I'll cover here in a second in the last 10 minutes. But I'm sitting in the infusion in the chair, and understand, and some of you may know, but there's horseshoes, chest high walls, and there's about 8 chairs in each horseshoe. And there's 5 horseshoes, and then a big, probably 50 people in there. It's cattle call for chemo. Probably 50 people at a time getting infusions. And when you're done, they roll you out and clean your chair off and get somebody else in. So I'm in my, bag runs out. I'm sitting on the front of my chair and got my shirt pulled down, and she's about to pull the port out. There'd have been a lady sitting next to me that day. And when I say she never shut up, she never shut. She was talking the whole time to other people on her phone. And I did the best I could to tune her out. I heard her, but I could not have told you a word she said. So I'm sitting there, I'm slid up on the edge of the chair. Nurse is getting ready to pull it out, and a voice in my head said, "Turn and listen to her." It's clear, crystal clear as you guys are hearing me right now. That voice in my head said, "Turn and listen to her." And I turned, and she was on her telephone. As soon as I picked up the side of her head, she said to whoever she was talking to on the phone, her new Bible verse I like today, it's Psalms 118, verse 17, and it says, "I shall not die, but live, and will proclaim what you have done for me." Through her, I just gotten a clear scan. Through her, he told me, "You're not going to die, you're going to live, but I need you to tell everybody about it." So thank you for letting me do that. That's what I'm doing right now. So thank you for helping me fulfill that. So we're done. I get out of the chair, walk out the door, and have had clear scans for 18 months since then. I continued on the immunotherapy until this past October. And, the trade-off for me is great, but less than 1% of the time, the immunotherapy can throw you into immunotherapy-induced type 1 diabetes, where the immunotherapy doesn't discriminate, and in attacking and attacking cancer, it can also do collateral damage, and it wiped out my islet cells in my pancreas, and those don't regenerate. So I'm got a pump in my leg, and I'm a full-fledged type 1 diabetic now, but compared to the alternative, I'll take it. I can manage diabetes the rest of my life to be here, so I'm good with it. So going back, driving to the hospital every morning became our routine. And part of the beautiful nature of the journey was the people. It's hard for me to talk about a lot of it because it was so special with a lot of the people I met that I never would have met, never would have been exposed to. And just wouldn't have created relationships, found out about people and what they were going through, and just it was a lot of life lessons that it gave me with a lot of the people I met. And you know, everybody was going through their own battles. I met a guy named Rick, and man, it's really hard for me to talk about Rick. Rick, I got to know. We happened to just seem to be there at the same time all the time. And Rick didn't make it. And but it was special enough for his wife to call me and tell me a couple weeks after he had passed. And the just the hearts of the caregivers, of the nurses and the doctors, just was a an eye-opening experience for me. And it just helped me believe that there's still a lot of good out there, regardless of the world that we're living in today. Um, that bond with the other patients and the um, nurses, and it allowed me to, especially after I got the clear scan. In the year I kept going to immunotherapy, and I would still see people. Went into the same room where you get the chemo, you get the immunotherapy infusion, and just being able to share my success and see other people's successes, but also share in the pain and praying with people and things like that. Again, it was just the journey was incredible. Um, the surgery was another, you know, it just shouldn't have happened. A lot of things the way that it happened. They told me to prepare in the expectation for surgery. They told me to prepare 2 weeks in the hospital. Minimum of 8 to 10 days, but bank on 2 weeks. I had surgery on February 5th, which was a Monday. And at 6:30 on Friday night, I was in my recliner at home on day 4 after surgery. After all that, she's a big reason why. The night I got, this was a 9.5 hour surgery, not including pre and post op. So just on the table, 9.5 hours. I got back to the room about 6:30 that night. I had drainage tube in my chest, one in my neck, one down in my lungs. And I'd been back in the room about 2 hours, and she said, "All right, let's go." And I laughed and said, "Oh, we get to go home now?" She said, "No, you're going to get up and walk." And I said, "I'm good." Well, she grabbed my feet and started to turn me and made me sit up in the bed. And we walked 2 laps that night, and that was on Monday night. And I measured it with my phone, technology, all the things we can do these days. And on Thursday, we did 1.7 miles. And it's because of her that I got out of there so fast. And again, part of the story is he has things for me to do. So he got me out of there as well. They told me 6 weeks out of work. I was back to work in 2. They said a year before you're fully recovered and starting to feel back to normal. I was pretty good in 6 months, and a year and 2 months afterward, I ran the Cooper River Bridge 10K in Charleston. And I keep saying but I really want to emphasize and make sure you guys understand that when I say it's not me. Everything that's going on in my life, the fact that I'll look at a stranger in the grocery store and share my story, I never would have done that before. I was always outgoing, but I was Peter, you know. I wasn't going to, if I had Christian music playing in my car and I was pulling up to somebody, that I wasn't a believer or didn't know, sometimes I instead of turning it up, I would turn it down. I sometimes with the people that I had in my life that weren't believers, I didn't want to impose anything on them, and I didn't want to, which is crazy because we're supposed to go to the ends of the earth. But that's kind of part of what I'm telling you about it. But going through the motions before all this happened. So, the, the community and everybody that rallied around me just reinforced everything that God was doing in my life and the people that he brought. And, the moment hit me at one point that it was no longer everything I was going through. It wasn't about survival or not. At some point pretty early on, he put a peace inside me beyond all understanding. And, as much as I was fighting and wanted to be here, I, at the same time, looked at her one day and I said, if this doesn't go my way, I'm good. We're not home yet, and I'm ready to go when that time comes. Um, and she told me something very early on, and again, it's one of the um, most probably the biggest emotional part of my story is she looked at me one day and she said, "You need to take your own advice that I've heard you tell kids that you coach." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Control the controllable." She said, "I've heard you tell, pitchers that come off the field and there were some errors made behind them and they're upset. And you said, can you help the shortstop making an error behind your right fielder dropping a ball? No. Well, then you can't let your body language change. Get the ball back, throw the next pitch. Okay. You can't control what goes on behind you. So don't let it affect your performance." She said, "You need to take your own advice." She said, "If you will control, your faith, your attitude, your relationships, your nutrition, your exercise," she said, "if you'll control all those things to the best of your ability, then what'll happen will happen the way it's supposed to happen, according to God's plan." And that's already been written. So, um, you know, she said, if you don't control those things to the best of your ability, if it goes your way, great. If it doesn't go your way, you may have some regrets. So control the controllable. And so that's the attitude that we went forward with early on. And then later on, Grace, our middle child, we were walking in the neighborhood about a year ago, and she looked at me and she said, "What would you change if you could?" And I said, "Man, that's a question I hadn't thought about." So we just kept walking, and it took me, a few seconds to think about it. And I said, "Grace," I said, "I'm not sure I would change anything." And she said, "Dad," she said, "there is no way you can't tell me that if you could go back to that time and choose to have cancer or not, and I said, "Grace, honestly," I said, "I'm healthier now probably than I was before." I said, "I'm a better husband, father, cousin, brother, uncle." I said, "I am in numerous ways a significant better version of myself, and I wouldn't be here had this not happened and I had gone through this." I said, "I don't think I would change a thing." And I said, "I'm sure I wouldn't change a thing." So, it's just strange and crazy to think that and to experience that, and then to that's the takeaway. But there's other things along the way with things people said to me, things I saw through TV programs or heard that I used to have a problem. But before I got diagnosed, and I know I need to stop, but 2 more minutes. Before I got diagnosed, um, in my going through the motions and everything, I wasn't present, like I think we should be, and like I've learned now. But being grateful for things and understanding that Jesus Christ heals. And here's the key. And I can't emphasize this enough because I'm going to go back to a sports analogy, but I'll have kids come to me and that I'll be doing hitting instruction in our cages, and I'll look at them and I'll say, "Do you believe you can be a good hitter?" Some of them will look at me and say, "I don't know." And I tell them that's my answer, because you're never going to believe or never going to be a good hitter unless you believe you can be a good hitter. And Jesus Christ will never heal us. Now, it may not be his will. He may have other plans, but I can reassure you that if you don't believe he can, you've got absolutely no shot. Okay. Faith that moves mountains and believing that he can heal is instrumental, I think, in that process. And he gave me the courage, and he gave me the again, I could told you I could go on for an hour. But he gave me the courage, and he gave my wife the courage to deal with me and deal with the situation as well. And that courage gave me that faith and that belief. And Jesus Christ has healed me, and he's kept me here for a reason. And, part of the reason I think is to share and to try to help other people understand that he is still here. He does still perform miracles, and he does still heal. So thank you for letting me be here today. I appreciate it.
Candy, is your family here?
My wife is right there. She is.
Welcome.
Yes.
We heard a lot about you today. I have a comment.
Yes.
With all the chemo
Yes, sir.
and all the radiation, if you lost your hair, I love the way it came back.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, yeah, no, yeah, the hair's good. The hair's good.
Are you gaining weight or are you holding even?
So, I'm about 155, and I eat everything in sight. I have to eat smaller amounts more, throughout the day, but, it's an interesting problem because I struggled with my weight, like I told you guys, beforehand, and now I can't put on weight. I'm about where I'll be the rest of my life, they said, and it's just, it's an interesting problem to have.
Mike, we ran into him maybe a year ago or less. We didn't recognize him, and we'd known him.
Oh.
We did not, he had to.
So
tell
yeah,
us who
so
it was.
backstory, Gail and Roger, when we joined the church in 97 before we got married, they did our new member. They were doing that back then, and so that's how we got to know. We've known Roger and Gail for 30 years. Yes. Any other questions?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
You said you were with your group back here. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit more about what you're doing with the church recently?
Recently,
Can you repeat his question?
yeah, so he said, with, the Sunday school class, the group we have back here, what are we kind of doing now? Going back, so we had at one point, how many couples did we have on the roster in Builders? Like 70, 60? We had 50 or 60 couples on the roster at one point. I know, yeah, so Brett Brown back there is who founded Builders pretty much in what, 97? 98?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was before around that time frame, maybe 96.
Yeah.
I know Emily and I started coming to church here in 97 before we got married, and we joined the class right after. So we joined it in 98. And I know that I think the only person that had a kid in the class was, what year was Clay born? Clay was, so Brittany was in there. And then, but yeah, so Builders grew, and then life happened, and, our kids got into high school and college, and we had a kind of a little bit of a disparity in age group, which was good. And it just kind of, ended up, people moved, and, what's that? And then COVID really, kind of happened. And so we meet across the hallway, same time you guys do. And Beth Buckwhite's over there, leads us, and we called it Remnant. So we're kind of the remnants left over from the Builders. But, right now, especially with the new pastor coming in, we've all discussed, and we would love to try to get people back and try to rekindle a little bit about what we had. So right now, that's, we're actively looking to get more involved, and we're all trying to, pray about it. And is this where we're supposed to be and get back into, or we know, we like being here, but, pray for a lot of the others and, where they're supposed to be. Cause there's a lot of people and it's not just, ex-builders. There's a lot of people struggling right now with the church, and not just Methodist, but, getting plugged in and where to be and so on and so forth, which, people have always struggled with, but for whatever reason and what's going on in our world today, I think it's a little bit more um, abbreviated today as far as, where people are and what they're doing and, where they want to be.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. And
Thank you, thank you. My sister, I was absent for, I don't know how many months, but I went down to stay with her and, actually I lived with her a while, but she had esophageal cancer. And when she went to the the oncologist said, anybody else, I would not do this surgery, but you, I will do the surgery. And she had the surgery. They took out ribs and, part of her stomach. Oh, man, she had major surgery. And I was with her through a lot of her chemo. But she was a fighter. And he knew that she was a fighter, but she was 75 years old at the time. Yeah. Yeah, she was 75, but she was a fighter. And it served the whole community well. That's just adding. So everybody have a great week and call somebody or speak to somebody during the week. Remember the retreat this week. So praise God.
Thank you, guys.